Hey guys, this is Neo from the Overclocker. Today, as per title, I'm here to give you my thoughts on the Gigabyte GeForce RTX 5060 Ti 16GB gaming OC card. I've been looking at these mid-range cards in the last few videos, and I'm back here again with another 5060 Ti, but this time in a 16GB format. As usual, with this level of GPU, price is a major factor, and this is where I should talk about these cards' current price versus the competition. So previously, this GPU was about 1,000 Rand cheaper or $60 cheaper than it is right now. But with the recent price adjustment, it finds itself in a rather tricky position. Not because of what the competition is offering in terms of their own 5060 Ti models, but from Gigabyte's own RTX 5070, which is just 1,500 Rand more. And moreover, there are two fan solutions like the WindForce and the Eagle OCIs, which are 600 Rand cheaper respectively. As such, while I initially found this to be excellent value, it is no longer the case as it's found itself in a highly contested price bracket. That being said, the gaming OC has improved a bit from my last experience with the gaming OC cards. The cooler seems more robust and for all intents and purposes is closer to the Aorus Elite cooler than it is to the more affordable counterparts. As such, temperatures are more than exceptional regardless of the load. In fact, much like the Aorus Elite 5060 I reviewed last time, the cooler on this card is over-spec'd for the GPU it's meant to be cooling. Visually, it won't match the Aorus Elite of course, as it only has one RGB lighting region, which is the Gigabyte logo. The fans are much smaller and they too of course have no RGB lighting of their own. It's an okay design visually that is more understated than anything else, but I do know that there are people who actually prefer this over and above the complex designs of modern cards. The gaming OC is a moderate sized card measuring 281 by 119 by 40 millimeters, and it should fit in virtually all modern gaming cases without issue. Features wise, as I said, there's not much to talk about here outside of the typical dual BIOS switch, which these days serves as a backup BIOS above anything else. The card runs quiet enough that switching to the quiet BIOS likely does nothing else, or at least in my case I didn't notice the noise levels drop or the performance change much at all. The card is powered by a single 8-pin power connector, and this seems to be more than enough even with the ability to increase power draw by up to 20%. Since we are talking about performance though, we may as well talk about overclocking on this card. Simply put, there's nothing out of the extraordinary here. By now, you should know what to expect from all RTX 50 cards. So that's plus 400 on the core and plus 3000 on the memory, with the power draw slider set to plus 20%. Since I've spoken before about the compromises of Gigabyte's own OC utility, I've used another vendor's utility instead for the overclocking. Now then, getting on with the benchmarks so you can determine for yourself if this level of performance is worth the asking price. Keep in mind that since I've been testing 8GB cards, which are only good for 1080p in 2025, I'll keep the 1080p test here as well so that you can appreciate the difference between this 16GB card and the 8GB cards that I was testing earlier. I've no doubt, however, that you could play 1440p with this 16GB card without much limitation, as long as you're willing to work with frame generation and DLSS of course. That said, testing was done on the AMD Ryzen 9 9900X, the ROG Crosshair X870i ATX, Corsair Vengeance DDR5 memory, all of which was powered by the Corsair HX1500i and cooled by the Corsair Titan RX 360mm AIO. First up, we have three marked tests, mainly TimeSpy Extreme, Speedway, and Steel Nomad. Out of the box, the 5060 Ti 16GB is fairly close to the Radeon RX 9060 XT 8GB in this benchmark without ray tracing. However, when you switch to 3D Mark Speedway, the Gigabyte 5060 Ti is about 40% faster than the 9060 XT, a clear architectural advantage for the NVIDIA cards. In the Unigen superposition test, between the same 9060 XT and the 5060 Ti, we see an 18% advantage to the 5060 Ti, which only grows to 34% when the card is overclocked. In the gaming tests, we first have Clear Obscure Expedition 33. I reran this a number of times, so not sure what is actually going on, but the 5060 Ti 16GB is more than twice as fast as the 8GB cards using the Epic preset. I suspect the bottleneck here is memory, which is why the two 8GB cards are delivering near identical performance. In Marvel's Spider-Man 2, we see similar behavior. The 8GB frame buffer caps performance of the GPUs, but as soon as you are free from this memory limit, you can see the actual GPU performance. The 5060 Ti here is 52% faster than the 9060 XT and 45% faster than the 5060. We then have Alan Wake 2. We don't have an apples-to-apples comparison here, as the Radeon card is using a much lower image quality setting with FSR 2.2. However, even with that being said, the 5060 Ti is offering 14% better performance on average with significantly better image quality. The 1% lows, however, are more important here, where the 5060 Ti is over 100% faster than both the 5060 and the 9060 XT. In Dragon Age the Veilguard, I believe we are seeing memory limitations shenanigans again. The 5060 and the 9060 XT are mostly neck and neck on average, falling 21% behind the 5060 Ti. When you add overclocking to this, the 5060 Ti is an impressive 37% faster than the 8GB 5060. In F1 2024, a game that can fit all its assets into the 8GB of frame buffer we have available, we can see the performance differences between the 5060, 9060 XT, and the 5060 Ti are not as pronounced. Yes, when we overclocked the 5060 Ti, it still managed to be 19% faster than the 9060 XT and 26% faster than the 5060. However, without the overclock, I'd say the 5060 Ti doesn't hold a meaningful advantage over the 8GB cards. In Cyberpunk 2077, with no form of upscaling applied, but with RT enabled, we see again that the 8GB cards are being tied at a hair under 60 FPS. The 5060 Ti offers 16% better performance, which is further increased to 30% with the overclock. It's one of those situations again, which I think exaggerate the differences in pure GPU grunt between the two 8GB cards and the 16GB 5060 Ti. We then have Forza Horizon 5. This game at this point runs on just about anything and everything modern, so the frame rates are more than playable regardless of which card you choose between these. The 5060 Ti has about a 13% advantage compared to the 8GB 5060. The last gaming title we have is Hitman World of Assassination. The 5060 Ti here doesn't seem so impressive against the 8GB cards, simply because there's no GPU memory to interfere with the raw performance. The 5060 Ti is just 10% faster than the 8GB 9060 XT, overclocking pushing that to 25%. Either way, the chief takeaway here for me is that the 8GB cards are well and truly on their last legs. This card makes more of a statement about the 8GB counterparts than it does about itself. So, would I recommend this card to you? Well, I'd say consider the Gigabyte GeForce RTX 5070 instead, which is just 1500 Rand more for a different class of performance. If you're willing to stretch your budget, that is. But if not, do consider the Windforce and the Eagle Ice editions instead, as they are cheaper and likely to deliver pretty much the same performance. Anyway, that's that from me and the Gigabyte GeForce RTX 5060 Ti 16GB gaming OC. So, until the next time, take care of yourselves and peace.